my name's Nick Blomley. I study geography. Geographers are interested in part in where things are. They argue that where things are can make a difference to how things unfold. I'm also interested in property. Property is the set of rules that concerns people's relations to things that are of value. One of those things, of course, is land. But another area of property concerns what we might call personal property, personal possessions. This is an example of personal property. It's an object that I own. Doesn't look like much. It's an old jug. It's been banged around quite a while. It's probably not worth very much if I were to sell it, but I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to sell it because it's a value to me. It's a value to me because, of course, it has history, like many of our personal possessions. Originally, it was owned by my grandparents. They got it when they were married. It came to me through my parents. So, of course, this object reminds me of who I am. It grounds me, gives me a sense of my identity, and connects me to my family. So I care about this object, and I want to make sure it's safe. I have a reasonable expectation that this object will be safe. That's in part, of course, because of where I am. Where am I? I'm in my home. I own my own home, and in that sense I have some degree of control over what happens in regards to the stuff that I own. In that sense, I'm quite privileged. Lots of people we can call precariously housed people, don't have that degree of control. That's the focus of a project that I'm engaged with, along with a group of wonderful other people, where we're looking across Canada at the question of precariously housed people and the degree to which they have control over their own stuff. And from a geographic perspective, of course, what they're doing, what precariously housed people do, is they occupy and move between multiple spaces over which they have relatively less degree of control. Other people, landlords or bylaw officials, bylaw officers, or the police, or people that run shelters, people who govern the spaces that precariously housed people use, have considerable control over those people and also their stuff. And that's our focus. And it's a focus that really hasn't been looked at in a serious way before. What we're discovering is that people's stuff in those spaces is very often stolen, seized, or destroyed. This is clearly a matter of social justice. Social justice concerns the distribution of resources and benefits across society. Because precariously housed people lack control over their spaces relative to people like me, there's clearly a differential, a social differential, in terms of people's ability to control things that matter to them.
So we've spoken to many precariously housed people concerning the challenges they face in controlling their own possessions. What they tell us is a pretty consistent story. They tell us that they're constantly losing their stuff. It's either seized or stolen or destroyed. They tell us that they lose their stuff in many spaces, not just living outside like folk here, but living in private rental or in modular housing or in shelters. They also face serious challenges in controlling their own possessions. They tell us that there's very little due process when people's stuff is taken, for example, by the authorities. Maybe their stuff is being held, if at all, but it's being held by the city many kilometres away. So it's almost impossible for them to get their stuff back. They note the way in which other people treat their stuff, and by extension them, in demeaning ways, failing to recognise the importance of the stuff to people. They think of their stuff as garbage or as junk or as something that maybe in some cases they can even make money from. They tell us the ways in which losing their possessions can be highly traumatic, making already an unstable and difficult life even more difficult. Losing one's IDs, for example, can be costly and destabilizing, but it happens all the time. They also talk about the cost of losing things with emotional significance, things that remind them of their own families, their own histories, losing those things, losing photos, for example, of their children who've maybe been taken into care. It's the only link they have to those kids. Losing their possessions can also be just physically costly. It can put them in difficult situations. They have to spend a lot of money and time getting their stuff back, on recovering, or getting new tents and tarps, for example. They also tell us that they have to face difficult choices. Do I control my own stuff or do I access healthcare? And as a consequence, the choices they have to face can often put people at serious risk. For all these reasons, stuff, very mundane and obvious, can be a social justice issue when we think about it in relation to the spaces that people occupy and the degree of control that they have over those spaces.